In the vast tapestry of time, there are moments that stand out, bold strokes that forever alter the colors of history. In the echoes of the Enlightenment, a symphony of ideas composed the melody of change. Philosophers penned words that would awaken a nation's longing for liberty. In 1789, a quill became a torch, setting aflame the passions of a people tired of oppression. Shadows danced in the halls of power, where the privileged few reveled while the masses languished in the shadows of inequality. The thunderclap of revolution echoed through the stone walls of the Bastille as the people dared to defy tyranny. Brushstrokes of passion brought forth leaders who would paint the canvas of history with their ideals. In the pursuit of liberty, the ink of ideals turned to blood, and the revolution, once a beacon of hope, descended into the shadows of fear. The pendulum swung, marking the fragile balance between the aspirations of a nation and the perils of unchecked power. As the sun set on revolution, a new dawn emerged, casting its shadow on the aspirations of a republic, giving rise to an era of uncertainty. In the shards of broken dreams, we find reflections of a tumultuous past, a reminder that revolutions, like glass, can be both beautiful and fragile. From the fragments of the past, a mosaic of legacy emerges. The ideals of the French Revolution endure, scattered across the world like seeds of change. In the late 18th century, the winds of change swept across Europe. The Enlightenment, a period of intellectual awakening, fueled a desire for individual freedoms and a re-evaluation of societal structures. In France, a deeply divided society struggled under the weight of economic inequality. The privileged aristocracy reveled in luxury, while the common people toiled in poverty. Discontent simmered beneath the surface. It was a period of political and societal change in France that began with the Estates General of 1789, and ended with the coup of 18 Brumaire in November 1799 and the formation of the French consulate. Many of its ideas are considered fundamental principles of liberal democracy, while its values and institutions remain central to modern French political discourse. Its causes are generally agreed to be a combination of social, political, and economic factors, which the Ancien regime proved unable to manage. A financial crisis and widespread social distress led, in May 1789, to the convocation of the Estates General, which was converted into a National Assembly in June. The storming of the Bastille on July 14 led to a series of radical measures by the Assembly, among them the abolition of feudalism, state control over the Catholic Church in France, and a Declaration of Rights. The next 3 years were dominated by the struggle for political control, exacerbated by economic depression. Military defeats following the outbreak of the French Revolutionary Wars in April 1792 resulted in the insurrection of August 10, 1792. The monarchy was abolished and replaced by the French First Republic in September, while Louis XVI was executed in January 1793. After another revolt in June 1793, the constitution was suspended and effective political power passed from the National Convention to the Committee of Public Safety. About 16,000 people were executed in a reign of terror, which ended in July 1794. Weakened by external threats and internal opposition, the Republic was replaced in 1795 by the Directory. 4 years later in 1799, the consulate seized power in a military coup led by Napoleon Bonaparte. This is generally seen as marking the end of the revolutionary period. The fall of the Bastille reverberated across France, symbolizing the rejection of absolute monarchy and the birth of a new era. The people had spoken, and the revolution had begun. The revolution was the result of multiple long-term and short-term factors that culminated in a social, economic, financial and political crisis in the late 1780s. Combined with resistance to reform by the ruling elite, and indecisive policy by Louis XVI and his ministers, the state was unable to manage the crisis. Between 1715 and 1789, the French population grew from an estimated 21 to 28 million. The proportion of the population living in towns increased to 20%, and Paris alone had over 600,000 inhabitants. Peasants comprised about 80% of the population, but the middle classes tripled over the century, reaching almost 10% of the population by 1789. Although the 18th century was a period of increasing prosperity, the benefits were distributed unevenly across regions and social groups. Those whose income derived from agriculture, rents, interest and trade in goods from France's slave colonies benefited most, while the living standards of wage laborers and farmers on rented land fell. Increasing inequality led to more social conflict. Economic recession from 1785 and bad harvests in 1787 and 1788 led to high unemployment and food prices, which coincided with a financial and political crisis for the monarchy. While the state also experienced a debt crisis, the level of debt itself was not high compared with Britain's. A major problem was that tax rates varied widely from one region to another, were often different from the official amounts, and collected inconsistently. Its complexity meant uncertainty over the amount any authorized tax actually contributed, and caused resentment among all taxpayers. Attempts to simplify the system were blocked by the regional parliaments which approved financial policy. The resulting impasse led to the calling of the Estates General, which became radicalized by the struggle for control of public finances. Louis XVI was willing to consider reforms, but often backed down when faced with opposition from conservative elements within the nobility. Enlightenment critiques of social institutions were widely discussed among the educated French elite, while the American Revolution and the European revolts of the 1780s inspired public debate on issues such as patriotism, liberty, equality, and the participation of the people in making laws. These debates helped shape the response of the educated public to the crisis facing the state. A series of public scandals such as the Diamond Necklace affair also fueled popular anger at the court, nobility, and church officials. As the revolution gained momentum, key figures emerged to lead the charge. Robespierre, Danton, and Marat, fueled by revolutionary fervor, sought to transform France into a republic. The revolutionaries faced internal and external threats, battling not only monarchs across Europe but also internal dissent. The National Assembly, formed in 1789, worked tirelessly to draft the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a groundbreaking document that proclaimed the equality and rights of all citizens. Despite their achievements, internal conflicts arose. The radical measures of the Reign of Terror were implemented to secure the revolution, leading to mass executions and political purges. As the revolution unfolded, the commitment to liberty and equality clashed with the harsh realities of governing. The revolutionary leaders faced challenges in maintaining the ideals of the early revolution while confronting external military threats. Despite the turmoil, the revolutionary spirit endured. The French Republic, under the leadership of figures like Robespierre, pursued ambitious reforms, including the adoption of the metric system and the establishment of a new calendar. The radical phase of the revolution saw the execution of King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, symbolizing the rejection of the monarchy. Political clubs like the Jacobins gained prominence, pushing for more extreme measures to protect the Republic. The Committee of Public Safety, led by Maximilien Robespierre, emerged as a dominant force. In the name of protecting the revolution, the Reign of Terror saw thousands sent to the guillotine. Fear and suspicion gripped the nation as citizens turned on each other. Although intended to bolster revolutionary fervor, the Reign of Terror rapidly degenerated into the settlement of personal grievances. At the end of July, the convention set price controls on a wide range of goods, with the death penalty for hoarders. On September 9, revolutionary groups were established to enforce these controls, while the law of suspects on 17 approved the arrest of suspected enemies of freedom. This initiated what has become known as the Terror. From September 1793 to July 1794, around 300,000 were arrested, with some 16,600 people executed on charges of counter-revolutionary activity, while another 40,000 may have been summarily executed, or died awaiting trial. Price controls made farmers reluctant to sell their produce in Parisian markets, and by early September, the city was suffering acute food shortages. At the same time, the war increased public debt, which the Assembly tried to finance by selling confiscated property. However, few would buy assets that might be repossessed by their former owners, a concern that could only be achieved by military victory. This meant the financial position worsened as threats to the Republic increased, while printing assignats to deal with the deficit further increased inflation. Internal dissent grew as citizens, disillusioned by the radical turn, expressed opposition. Rival factions within the revolutionary government, like the Girondins and the Montagnards, further fueled the turmoil. On October 10, the convention recognized the Committee of Public Safety as the supreme revolutionary government, and suspended the constitution until peace was achieved. In mid-October, Marie Antoinette was convicted of a long list of crimes, and guillotined. 2 weeks later, the Girondist leaders arrested in June were also executed, along with Philippe Égalité. The Terror was not confined to Paris, with over 2,000 killed in Lyons after its recapture. At Cholet on October 17, the Republican Army won a decisive victory over the Vaude rebels, and the survivors escaped into Brittany. Another defeat at Le Mans on December 23 ended the rebellion as a major threat, although the insurgency continued until 1796. The extent of the repression that followed has been debated by French historians since the mid-19th century. Between November 1793 to February 1794, over 4,000 were drowned in the Loire at Nantes under the supervision of Jean-Baptiste Carrier. Historian Reynaud Secker claims that as many as 117,000 died between 1793 and 1796. Although those numbers have been challenged, François Furet concluded it not only revealed massacre and destruction on an unprecedented scale, but a zeal so violent that it has bestowed as its legacy much of the region's identity. At the height of the Terror, not even its supporters were immune from suspicion, leading to divisions within the Montagnard faction between radical Hebertists and moderates led by Danton. Robespierre saw their dispute as destabilizing the regime, and, as a deist, objected to the anti-religious policies advocated by the atheist Hébert, who was arrested and executed on March 24 with 19 of his colleagues, including Carrier. To retain the loyalty of the remaining Hebertists, Danton was arrested and executed on April 5 with Camille Desmoulins, after a show trial that arguably did more damage to Robespierre than any other act in this period. The once powerful figure of Maximilien Robespierre faced internal opposition. Accused of excesses during the Reign of Terror, Robespierre and his associates were arrested and faced their own trials. The revolution, which had consumed so many, now turned on its own leaders. The law of 22 Prairial, June 10, denied enemies of the people the right to defend themselves. Those arrested in the provinces were now sent to Paris for judgment. From March to July, executions in Paris increased from 5 to 26 a day. Many Jacobins ridiculed the festival of the cult of the Supreme being on June 8, a lavish and expensive ceremony led by Robespierre, who was also accused of circulating claims he was a second Messiah. Relaxation of price controls and rampant inflation caused increasing unrest among the sans-culottes, but the improved military situation reduced fears the Republic was in danger. Fearing their own survival depended on Robespierre's removal, on June 29 3 members of the Committee of Public Safety openly accused him of being a dictator. Robespierre responded by refusing to attend committee meetings, allowing his opponents to build a coalition against him. In a speech made to the convention on July 26, he claimed certain members were conspiring against the Republic, an almost certain death sentence if confirmed. When he refused to provide names, the session broke up in confusion. That evening he repeated these claims at the Jacobins Club, where it was greeted with demands for execution of the traitors. Fearing the consequences if they did not act first, his opponents attacked Robespierre and his allies in the convention next day. When Robespierre attempted to speak, his voice failed, one deputy crying, "The blood of Danton chokes him." After the convention authorized his arrest, he and his supporters took refuge in the Hôtel de Ville, which was defended by elements of the National Guard. Other units loyal to the convention stormed the building that evening and detained Robespierre, who severely injured himself attempting suicide. He was executed on July 28 with 19 colleagues, including Saint-Just and Georges Couthon, followed by 83 members of the Commune. The law of 22 Prairial was repealed, any surviving Girondists reinstated as deputies, and the Jacobin Club was closed and banned. In the vacuum left by the fall of Robespierre, a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte emerged as a charismatic leader. His military successes and ambition propelled him to prominence, ultimately leading to the establishment of the consulate and later, the rise of the Napoleonic era. The bloodshed did not end with the death of Robespierre. Southern France saw a wave of revenge killings, directed against alleged Jacobins, Republican officials and Protestants. Although the victors of Thermidor asserted control over the Commune by executing their leaders, some of those closely involved in the Terror retained their positions. They included Paul Barras, later chief executive of the French Directory, and Joseph Fouché, director of the killings in Lyon, who served as Minister of Police under the Directory, the Consulate and Empire. Despite his links to Augustin Robespierre, military success in Italy meant Napoleon Bonaparte escaped censure. Jacobin sympathizers viewed the Directory as a betrayal of the revolution, while Bonapartists later justified Napoleon's coup by emphasizing its corruption. The regime also faced internal unrest, a weak economy, and an expensive war, while the Council of 500 could block legislation at will. Since the directors had no power to call new elections, the only way to break a deadlock was rule by decree or use force. As a result, the Directory was characterized by chronic violence, ambivalent forms of justice, and repeated recourse to heavy-handed repression. The French Revolution forever changed the course of history. While it may have ended in political instability, it paved the way for the spread of democratic ideals, inspiring movements for freedom and equality worldwide. As we conclude our journey through the tumultuous years of the French Revolution, we are left with the echoes of a bygone era, a symphony of voices that reverberate through time. Today, the streets of Paris tell a different story. The echoes of the revolution are woven into the fabric of a city that has weathered the storms of history. The once revolutionary fervor has given way to a society shaped by the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Art, too, has played its part in preserving the spirit of the revolution. The canvas becomes a mirror reflecting the enduring values that emerged from the struggle of the French people. As we bid farewell to the shadows of the past, let us carry with us the lessons learned from the French Revolution. In the pursuit of a better world, may we find inspiration in the enduring quest for liberty, equality, and fraternity.